Hey everyone, so this is going to be a video covering connections in The Outsiders. So our objective for this lesson is going to be to identify and establish connections between works of literature and the world that we live in. Our question that we're really going to be honing in on is if this book references other texts, stop and jot down those references. Then go back and look them up if you need to. Ask yourself, why does the other include those? So we got to think about, okay, there's a couple of different types of connections that a book can establish. And specifically within ELA, we think of three main ones. So let me get my pen ready here. So the first one that we see fairly often, and that teachers probably have asked you to do before, is what's known as a text-to-self connection. That's when you're really relating yourself to that protagonist. So are there things that I like about this protagonist? Are there things I don't like about this protagonist? Are there things that this protagonist does that reminds me about myself? Does this protagonist, have a similar outlook on life as to me? That would be a text-to-self connection. The next type of connection that you can have is a text-to-text connection. So this is where often you're going to see an allusion to another well-known story or should be well-known tale. And what the author typically tries to do there is they're trying to establish parallels. So what's happening in one story should be similar to what's happening in the other story. We're going to see that kind of connection in our excerpt for today. But the last kind of connection that can be made is what's known as the text-to-world connection. This is where you look at kind of the world that the story has been set in. Are there characters dealing with similar issues? Are there things that are going on in the world that are mirroring what's happening in your world? Like, I know that oftentimes a lot of politicians have been referencing kind of dystopian literature to parallel what's happening right now with all of the stay-at-home orders and the diseases and everything and corona. All of that, they try to draw those kind of text-to-world connections. Or if you hear, that's very Orwellian. A lot of people are trying to establish a text-to-world connection. So, but like I said, what we're really going to be hitting and honing in on is the question kind of gave it away. So we're going to be looking at this text-to-text connection. So we're going to be reading through the brief excerpt that I picked. It's only about a paragraph long. And then I'm going to talk about what the text-to-text connection is and why the author, or why I think the author, made that text-to-text connection. So this section is kind of coming closer to the end of the story. So Ponyboy's gone on his adventure. He's lost Dally, and he's lost Johnny. So both of them have already kind of died. Spoilers if you haven't read it. And this section does a really good job of alluding to, and throughout the book, it alludes to one very specific well-known story at that time. So we're going to read through, we're going to find out what that story is, and we're going to hypothesize why S.E. Hinton would have done that. So, get my cursor ready. I still didn't want to do my homework that night, though. I hunted around for a book to read, but I'd read everything in the house about 50 million times. Even Derry's copy of The Carpetbaggers, though he told me I wasn't old enough to read it. I thought so too after finishing it. Finally, I picked up Gone with the Wind, and I looked at it for a long time. I knew Johnny was dead. I'd known all the time, even while I was sick and pretending he wasn't. It was Johnny, not me, who had killed Bob. I knew that too. I had just thought that maybe if I played like Johnny wasn't dead, it wouldn't hurt so much. The way Two-Bit, after the police had taken Dally's body away, had griped because he'd lost his switchblade when they searched Dallas. So we're not going to read too further. And in here, they do mention 2 different books, but one is a little bit more significant than the other. So the one that they do seem to mention a lot is Derry's, or not that often, excuse me. It's just kind of a once over that they mention the Carpetbaggers, but what they mention a lot is Gone with the Wind. And so if you go and research Gone with the Wind, you're going to see that a lot of what happens in that story is similar to what happens in The Outsiders, and themes and topics that The Outsiders tries to cover, like a coming-of-age tale where the protagonist is thrust into kind of a lower-class situation. So both Ponyboy and the protagonist from Gone with the Wind are in lower-class situations, and they try to rise out of that. But it goes a little bit differently, obviously. You know, Ponyboy accepts where he's at. He likes his status as a greaser, whereas Gone with the Wind, it goes in a little bit different of a direction. So it's a very simple, very kind of brief video looking at connections in The Outsiders. So I hope this helps you as you're trying to formulate text-to-text or text-to-world or text-to-self connections in between whatever novel you chose and whatever medium you choose to connect it to.